Tato, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council. Welcome to councillors. We have full muster. Welcome to the media, the public and to staff. Our prayer today will be led by the Very Reverend Trevor James, Dean of St Paul's Cathedral. Stand.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Share with you a prayer said each day in the cathedral. Gracious Lord of all that is, you delight in all fullness of life. Look with your grace and mercy upon our city. Bless all who labour for the common good and serve to build up the life we share. Bless our council, our university, and all places of learning, our courts, all who administer justice, and all who seek it, our hospitals, and all places of healing, social service, and support, that your fullness of life and purpose will abound and flourish here, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. And for the season, God our Creator, we thank you for our summer season, our time of holidays and celebration, our time to ponder again the mystery of the Word made flesh, our time to sense once more your love and purpose in all creation. Encourage all doubtful and despairing, and so work in our hearts across all faiths, that we may reflect your love, and in our daily living so strive that we may hasten your kingdom and serve your great purpose. In your name we pray. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Justice. Okay, moving on. We have no apologies. The item listed on item 5, declaration of interest, that is for noting.
Sorry, aren't we starting with public forum? Or?
No.
Oh, good.
I've yet to get to the confirmation of the agenda.
Sorry.
Confirmation of the agenda. Now, I wish to amend the agenda. I want to bring item C2 in the non-public part of the agenda forward. This is because some advisors on this item, whom I know councillors will wish to ask questions of, have to fly out of the city mid-afternoon. So I propose to leave the order of the meeting as it is, except for item C2, which I wish to bring forward as the very first item preceding public forum. And my apologies to those who have come for public forum. It will mean a half-hour delay for you, and I'm sorry about that, but this has been sprung on us at the last minute, and it is important. So I'll move from the chair that the council brings the item C2 forward to the beginning of this meeting, and further to that end I move that council excludes the public from the following part of the proceedings of this meeting for the reasons outlined in the agenda paper, with the exception of Mr Scott Pickering and his team of 3. Seconded, Councillor Staines. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, I think we can get underway again. So we're now into public forum, and once again my apologies for keeping people waiting who had expected to speak at 1 or shortly thereafter. So can I invite Peter Foster up to address us on our decision on the drilling. Welcome.
Hello?
No.
Was on. Just do. Okay, thanks. Worship Mayor and Councillors, last month you made a decision which I think was based on, pressured on some quite inaccurate information, so I'd like to present you some more accurate material. In climate change there are two major confusions. The first is between climate, which is always changing, always has, always will, Most recently, it's been taking some 300 years to come out of the Little Ice Age. Between that and the cause, whether the cause is carbon dioxide or something else. And people talk about climate change and they quite often think that that automatically means caused by carbon dioxide. As we'll see, that is not true. The second confusion relates to the use of projections of the climate models as opposed to data that comes from the real world that we live in. And with that respect, I'd like to take the format on some scientific method used by Richard Feynman, who was a Nobel laureate in physics in '65 and one of the 10, regarded as the 10 most prominent, eminent physicists of the era. And that if you make a new law, the first thing you do is you guess it. You take a guess. In this case, the guess is that carbon dioxide drives climate change. The second thing you do is to then compute the implications of that guess. What does it mean? How does it work? That is where the climate models are. They are merely carrying out a theoretical exercise on what would happen if this theory is true, then this is the consequences. The third thing that happens is that you compare the results of the models with reality, with observation, with experiment. And if they don't match, then the theory is wrong. And in Feynman's word, if it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't matter how beautiful your guess is, doesn't matter who said it, what his name was, or anything else. If it disagrees with experiment, it is wrong. And furthermore, as Einstein pointed out, you don't need to prove every aspect of a theory wrong. You only need to prove one aspect. If it doesn't match with observation, it is wrong. So if we could proceed to this diagram here on the second page, which is carbon dioxide and temperature over the last 600 million years. And if you look through the temperature and the carbon dioxide, you'll see there is no correlation, and that has been shown in peer-reviewed research as well. There is no correlation between carbon dioxide rising ahead of warming and reducing ahead of cooling. The bottom graph shows the last 67 million years in a bit more detail. The last warm period was the Eocene, which there was no ice caps. In fact, for 75% of that 600 million years, the Earth has had no polar ice caps. We have polar ice caps. We are still in an ice age. Being a bit warmer could be nice. Anyway, below that is a graph of the biodiversity. And if you'll see there, that life thrived in the Eocene. There was no object to that. Now on the next page is a graph of, I'm sorry, I won't have time to go through all of this in detail. I'm just going to skim through bits of it and it's information that you can look at later. One of the things that the Eocene showed was that the tropical temperatures were no warmer than today, and there are very good physical reasons for that. All the temperature increase occurs at the poles. So the poles warm, the equator does not. It gets broader. The tropical rain band gets much broader, but it doesn't. So when we look at the Greenland, we're seeing a polar region basically, and we're seeing the extremes of change of climate. And if you look below that, the graph below it comes from the IPCC report, page 483. It shows no change. So therefore, we had 10,000 years of extensive climate change with no change in carbon dioxide. Quite clearly, carbon dioxide didn't drive it. It means that the models, the climate models, cannot work backwards. That invalidates them. It is a standard test of a theoretical model to run it backwards. It cannot reproduce the past. It cannot, because carbon dioxide didn't change. And the models are totally predicated on carbon dioxide being the driver of climate. So, we have a situation where there is not one known change of climate in the last 600 million years which has been shown to have been caused by carbon dioxide. Not one. There is not one peer-reviewed paper in existence that shows that. On the other hand, in the last year, we've had 107 papers showing a link between solar activity and climate. None showing a relationship between carbon dioxide and climate. Okay, now the climate models, I've gone through a few things. The models are predicated on certain assumptions. One such assumption is that water vapour will increase because water vapour is the main greenhouse gas by a factor of about 80 to 100 to 1. It is the main greenhouse gas. If water doesn't increase, you're not going to get much more increase in effect. And I show you a graph there from, this is on page 4, from recent research that shows no increase in greenhouse gases since 1992. That is a model failure. But we do have an increase in cloud. That is a model failure because the models are predicated on cloud either staying the same or decreasing with warming. The IPCC says that it knows neither the magnitude or the sign of the cloud effect and warming. And yet all the models have a value put in which is positive. So how can you put in a value into a model when you then admit that you don't even know what the value is? So those models are guesses. They are guesses. And the output of those models are guesses. Now, on page 5 is the most important graph of all. That's this one here. It comes from the IPCC supplementary material to its 5th assessment report. The red band on the right is what the computer models predict the temperature, the key to all of the warming from carbon dioxide comes from warming the upper tropical atmosphere. That's where warming originates as perceived by the models. So the red band shows the temperature range expected from carbon dioxide in this tropical hotspot. The blue band is the model's prediction of the same models show with no carbon dioxide effect. The white band within the blue is the actual data from 4 sets of balloons, 2 sets of satellite data. Both correlate exceedingly well, and they show that the actual temperature range is totally within the range expected if carbon dioxide is having no effect. The bottom graph there shows the time system, so that as carbon dioxide increases, the models perceive that temperature gap to get wider and wider. The reality is that it hasn't moved at all. Okay, now after that I have provided some information on sea levels, because that's particularly for Dunedin. There are 4 papers. Now, I did ask if Pam would email this to you so you could just copy and paste some of the URLs I have there at various stages. There are 4 papers that show, 4 recent papers, there are actually hundreds of papers in total, but there are 4 recent papers that have examined sea levels in detail and show no anthropogenic signal in sea level rise. It is all perfectly explainable. And at the moment we have warm temperatures due to El Nino. There is a paper that shows that all of the temperature increases in global warming since 1982 can be totally attributed to El Ninos. Such as, if on page 7 is the latest from the UAH satellite temperature data for the world, and you can see that the last El Nino is equivalent to the one in 97-98. And in fact, in the ODT in Dunedin, they reported that the temperature for Otago was the same for this autumn period as it was in 98. which is pretty logical because both El Ninos were major and both, as you can see, have a similar signal. So thereafter, I've just given you some data from the world, actual recorded data on droughts, hurricanes, tornadoes, to show that in fact there is not one extreme form of weather which has increased in the last 60 years. Not one. So I think I leave this information with you. If you wish to have more discussion about it, I'm perfectly happy to do that. But I think my 5 minutes are probably well gone, are they?
Probably. Mr. Foster, you can take questions?
Yes.
Councillors, questions. Councillor Beck.
Thank you very much for bringing all this data to us, because we haven't always had a lot of data. A lot of it has been opinion or projections or guesses, as you've pointed out. I'm looking at a fair old history here of guesses that turned out not to be correct. Al Gore's hockey stick, for instance, which didn't quite pan out, then having to invent the pause to explain that there wasn't an increase in temperatures. Recently, the head PR person for NASA, who have been long advocating CO2 as the climate change main reason, said, and he said it on Facebook even recently, that Antarctic ice increase since 1979, consistent increase, had come as a bit of a mystery. How do you see the NASA view of CO2 causing climate change? Why do you think they are still pushing that, even given that Antarctic ice seems to be a bit of a mystery in their theory?
Oh, I think it's pretty clear. First, you have to realise that the vast majority of scientists who get their money and the funding under the name of climate change are not working on whether CO2 is driving climate. They're working on peripheral aspects, and for them it's a great gravy train. And if you're on that gravy train, you get funded, and it's as simple as that. Particularly so with NASA. Now, as far as the Antarctic ice is concerned, I think the reason is pretty clear. When you look at the actual data for the sea surface temperatures, it has been falling. The Southern Ocean in particular has been falling faster than other oceans. The Pacific has been cooling. And sea ice forms at minus 1.96. If the sea doesn't get to 1.96, it doesn't form. There was a theory that the sea ice was being blown out from the coast, but there is no evidence that the winds got stronger or anything else. But again, if it's blown into warmer water, it will melt. So I suspect that it's got everything to do with the cooling sea.
So all the data that you've presented is suggesting that CO2 isn't the driver of climate change.
Yes.
Are you now suggesting that climate change isn't happening, or that it's happening because of solar or other effects that we can't do anything about?
It has always changed. As I pointed out, it has changed, but CO2 didn't. So obviously there are other drivers. And the one which is most favoured at the moment is the solar activity. Now, the difference between the sun when it's active and not active is not huge. But what it does do is when it's active, it absorbs or deflects cosmic radiation from coming into the Earth. And Heinrich Svensmark has shown years ago that galactic cosmic radiation causes cloud seeding molecules to form in the lower atmosphere. And that was recently confirmed by the Large Hadron Collider, where they used that collider to simulate cosmic rays. And quite surprisingly, while Svensmark had been working on other molecules, being cloud seeding molecules, they found at CERN that, in fact, aerosols released by plants when hit by cosmic radiation produced cloud seeding molecules. And a slight increase in cloud will have a lot more cooling effect, particularly low cloud. because low cloud shades the Earth, but it allows the energy to escape, radiation to escape from above the cloud. It's got clear sky, so it escapes. So it has quite a cooling effect.
Okay, finally, your best guess then about what the sea level rise is going to do, whether it's caused by CO2 or other agencies. What's your best guess about sea level rise and about what, for instance, caused the little mini ice age you referred to, or any other ice age? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, the little ice age was punctuated by 4 periods when the sun had very low to no solar activity, as in flares. And at the moment, the sun is going quiet. It has for a decade been reducing in strength. It's expected by 2033 that there will be no more sunspots, which means it's entering a period similar to what's called the Maunder minima of the 16th, 17th century. There were 4 minima there, which were associated with the Little Ice Age. So there are quite a lot of scientists who believe that the world's going to be going cooler because of that. Now, time will tell.
So finally, you don't think we should be spending a lot of money at this point anticipating sea level rise as per the Fitzharris report?
No. The sea level rise, your best indicator is the tide gauges you have here. As I said in my thing, it's where you get your feet wet. And when that changes, it's not going to happen quickly. You're not going to have a metre rise in a year, anything like it. You're going to have decades, if not centuries. I think NIWA scientist said that it would take a 30 centimetre rise to start having an effect on South Dunedin, and at the current rate of sea level rise, which is 1.28 millimetres a year, that would take some 250 years. So I don't think the DCC has to leap in and do anything drastic at this point in time.
Thank you.
Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you, Mr Foster, for your time and energy and coming along to address us. I understand that you noted that the previous council meeting made a decision that you didn't agree with. If we take climate change or whatever out of the equation, what would you have us do in terms of the block offer, and why? Well,
simply because if someone wants to explore for oil off the Otago coast, then Dunedin is in a good position to get employment and earnings from that.
And what about the damage to the animals, the sea, marine life, plants, and damage to them?
That depends on how you perceive the risk of an accident happening, which might cause that. I mean, there are thousands of oil rigs around the world, and the number of accidents is not high relative to the number of rigs. I'd much rather they put a rig off Otago's coast than try putting it in the Ross Sea, where the movement of ice would certainly wipe it out.
It's just that, Dunedin prides ourselves on having unique habitats and wild, marine life and the seals and the albatross colonies, etc. So it seems to me rather foolish to go along that route of exploration, which to me is a 19th century extraction process that we don't need to be continuing on with, but that we would risk that seems rather foolhardy to me, which is why I supported the previous council meeting's motion.
Well, at the point where you're doing the exploration, there's a huge gap between exploring and finding out what's there and actually coming in and wanting to extract it. At the moment, the world is absolutely awash with oil. The Americans have just discovered a huge shale oil field. Britain has huge fields. I don't think anyone's going to come and do an expensive drilling exercise anytime soon, but knowing what's there is a different matter. I think you know what's there, but whether you mine it or not, that becomes another issue.
Councillor Newell.
Firstly, thank you very much for your time.
Can I just caution everyone, we're at question time, so this is in danger of getting into a discussion, so not necessarily you, but questions. please.
Okay. Given that, as you've just said, the world is awash with oil, and they won't be back here for quite some time, take into account the advancement that we are having in technology on a daily basis regarding electric technology, why would we possibly risk it when they're not going to come back for 20 or 30 years, if not longer? And we also know that we're not going to need or rely on that technology in that time. What's the point?
Well, I don't know that you do know that, but what we do know is if they come and do an exploration, it's going to take quite a while, and there's probably quite a reasonable return in employment, whatever, in Dunedin. So,
Was present.
So no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Foster.
okay, thank you.
Tom.
Thank you.
Now the Arowana Pilots Wharf Restoration Trust are represented here. Mr. Davis, Ms. Denson, and I take it you don't have Councillor Noon with you. Mr. Noon.
Yes. Another meeting.
Welcome.
Testing. Yes, very good. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. My name's John Davis, Secretary of the Arowana League, and beside me is Tracy Denson, Trustee of the Arowana Pilots Wharf Restoration Charitable Trust. We're here today to update the many new councillors of our desire to restore the historic Arowana Pilots Wharf. Following local government reform of 1989, Otago Harbour Board recreational assets such as wharves were passed to the DCC, example Glenfelloch, Wells Rock, etc. Since the early 2000, 2001, 2002, the League, with the support from the Chalmers Community Board, have sought for the much needed maintenance. The League presumed that Port Otago would continue to maintain the wharf. However, in around 2008, 2009, Port Otago passed the parcel to the DCC. The DCC finally accepted ownership and obtained an engineer's report which recommended demolition. The League campaigned against demolition, and in June 2015, the DCC realised the community's dedication to keep the wharf and voted 13 to 1 for council staff to work with us to restore the wharf, hence the establishment of the Restoration Trust. Tracy.
So we then set up the trust because noted interest in this project was far greater than just the Arowana community. We have local, national and international supporters for this restoration. The trust was formed to fundraise and manage the restoration project. We've projected costings, engaged a well-known Otago marine engineer, kept people informed and have been proactive in liaising and consulting with the DCC and relevant stakeholders, DOC, ORC, etc., to complete this project and restore the iconic wharf for the benefit of all. For those new councillors, we've got an Appendix 1 and the close-up is on Appendix 2. The wharf is on the opposite side of the heads to the albatross colony in the township of Aramoana, and the wharf is on an area known as the Spit. Historically, there has been a landing stage, wharf, jetty at this area since 1800s. The prison hulk was moored at the original jetty in 1884, 132 years ago. The wharf was used by the Home Guards in both World Wars. The wharf is next to and associated with the nearby Basil Hooper designed pilots' houses, built in 1913, as this wharf is also known as the Pilot's Wharf. Also over the years, Spit Jetty or Aramoana Wharf. It was used by the Otago Harbour Board, Port Otago pilots' boats, and in the early 1900s by harbour ferries. See Appendix 3. The DCC had an archaeological and heritage assessment done in 2015. The full report is online with Council. I have copied the front page, which is Appendix 4, and some paragraphs and pages. So the executive summary, page 1, figure 1, page 33, figure 2, page 34, figure 3. for your reading, and as this assessment quotes under recommendations of general heritage, the existing spit jetty has heritage values that are associated with the continuing use of the site as a landing site since at least 1884, and in particular with the value the local community places on the landing. Retention or reconstruction of the spit jetty will allow these values and associations to continue. So if you have a look at Appendix 2 and 5, Figure 5, showing the existing wharf, it does not extend into the dunes, so no effect on prehistoric archaeological values. The wharf would be restored in the same footprint, if not smaller, by qualified persons to marine engineered plans. ORC have been involved and a certificate of compliance would be issued on completion of the restoration. Once restored, the wharf would go back onto the Otago Harbour Reserves Management Plan, which council staff found it had dropped off mysteriously from some years ago. Access to and from the wharf would not change. It is by foot traffic or boat only. The wharf use, the usage of this wharf is for recreational fishers by foot and boat. Dunedin's known by fisher persons as the Salmon City. Beach walkers, artists, photographers, it's the link between our peninsular communities. It's a great viewing platform and the closest first encounter to welcoming and the last to farewelling our cruise boat visitors, but also for wildlife watchers, as you see on Appendix 5, Figure 4, and the odd sea lion observer. The wharf links into the Council's 4 strategies: social wellbeing, environmental, cultural, parks and recreation, providing recreational access to the harbour while retaining identified heritage community values. It has been used on many occasions by search and rescue, the Coast Guard and for marine emergencies. Also, with there being only one road in from Deborah Bay to Aramoana, in the event this road was closed due to something beyond our realms, this wharf has been on standby before as an exit option. Now, due to the condition of the wharf, Appendix 5, Figure 5, and the health and safety regs, safety barriers and signage to keep persons off it have been constructed. And as this process is taking a long while with the many council staff changes that we've had and meetings with stakeholders, the users of this iconic structure are getting very frustrated. The Trust and the Aramoana League thought this structure would have existing use rights, being the current wharf was rebuilt in the 1960s before the area was delegated conservation area in 1998. DOC has advised DCC and our Trust that it does not have existing use rights and that approximately 14 metres of the access jetty to the wharf, Appendix 2, area shown in blue, was now within the 1998 delegated conservation area, and therefore Council, as asset owners, need to apply for a concession of occupation to DOC. The Trust has been working with DCC staff on this, and due to the deterioration of the wharf and the new health and safety legislation, we are here to update the new councillors and ask and encourage the DCC to action and proceed with the concession application to DOC as soon as possible so we can get on and restore this historical structure. It's been, and we wish again for it to be, a wonderful recreational public amenity. Our history is New Zealand's unique legacy for us to enjoy it, enrich it and pass it on to the future generations. So we thank you, the Council, for your previous vote of support in 2015, and we look forward to your continued support and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Councillor Little.
Look, I've got one question. I was supportive 3 years ago or 2 years ago when we had this decision, but the question that was subsequently raised was about the sea lion breeding area in the marshland and salt marsh.
Sure.
Yeah, my question is, and it's probably one that it doesn't sit well with you, but if we, I'm just thinking, if this was to be rebuilt and rebuilt to a good standard that a boat could come against it and stop and offload passengers or whatever. And I think about the fact that in the future we hope to have right around the harbour cycleways. Would there be any real reason why you couldn't relocate the wharf right through to here where the groin or the spit or whatever it is goes out?
The mole.
The mole, yep. Roughly about the same point where the beach goes out the other way, so that you wouldn't, if you came across with a bike, have to push it through sand or carry it on your back up the beach. Would you be absolutely stuck to that location? Because that's...
Well, the whole purpose in the early stages was to maintain what was there because it had such historic value. It's got to the stage, if we can retain, as we said then, a couple of piles, that might be all that we do retain. It'll be virtually impossible to build one off the mole with the sea and the surge that occurs there. And we'd have to go through the whole process of resource consent, where this is a permitted activity, it's maintenance of an existing structure. Unfortunate if people have to push their bike along the beach, but that's part of the joy of the place.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
So, I'm just trying to get the context for this. These photos on Appendix 5, my understanding is the area is actually roped off at present, is it?
Yes, there shouldn't be people on it. It's the DCC and ourselves, we've fenced it off, and you can't get onto the wharf. You could get by water, but I doubt whether you would.
And so it's just whether it is a structure that's still being used, because how long hasn't it been used for now?
It's been fenced off since around the DCC's acceptance of ownership. I'm saying around the 2012-13, something like that. Might have been a bit later, 2014. But having said that, someone could fish off it if they wanted to.
And the other question I have is under health and safety, and the law has changed substantially since you came to us last time, and that makes me more nervous with your comment then, is whose liability under health and safety now if someone hurt themselves because it was there? Are you aware of that at all? That would be a question I would put. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Can I just clarify, you said this is a permitted activity with the OIC already? Or?
Yes, it is. It's under their coastal plan.
So there's no requirement to get that permitted again. So you are talking exclusively about getting DOC to give us permission to work in the conservation area?
Yes, it's called a concession.
Yep. Cool. Just want to clarify that.
And just on the concession, we do have the doubts because of existing use rights, and that has even been brought up by some members of DOC. But the conversations that the DCC staff have had with DOC are that they do have to apply for a concession, which is an easier approach. If it fails, it fails. But at least we can blame someone else then, not the DCC.
And if we apply for a concession and get it, then you can start the work on the restoration.
That's the idea. It's silly raising funds for something that's not going to go ahead. But honestly, it's so long. I'm going to be a very, very old man by the time we get there. It's been 10 years at least now. So.
And it's only it's around $1,200 for the concession. You know, we've raised well over $12,000, already. So, and we're on hold. And we have been on hold since June 2015. We haven't wanted to fundraise for more because it puts us in a very dodgy situation, So, yeah.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks John and Tracy for coming back again. John, I'm sure you've lost count by now of your appearances before this institution, but my question's probably for the Chief Executive or her delegate as to when, what timeline Council can expect a report on this to inform a decision, which obviously we can't make at this forum, but it would be good to give some sense of time to submit this.
I think they are saying, my delegates, next week. Next week?
It'll be on the agenda on Monday.
It's on the agenda next week.
Thank you.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Tracy and John. That was very informative to catch us up. My question is, have you been given an indication of the time it would take for a concession to be granted once the application goes in? I might have missed that, I apologise if I did.
We're dealing with DOC.
Yes, I realise that, that's why I'm asking.
Honestly, no idea whatsoever. I think an application goes in, there's different stories as well, whether it's got to be notified or not. Seeing anything over 10 years, it's got to be notified, so it'll be public notification, appeals, if there's appeals, you know.
Is there any indication from staff around that length of that process? They may have had some conversations with DOC. Would anyone have any indication? Worst case scenario timeline? Oh, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Elder.
So you're looking for us to make an application for concession. So you're coming here for us to do that rather than to ask for funding for the rebuild, or what's happening with the funding for the rebuild?
Absolutely. When we fronted up to council quite a few years ago, we were told there was no money in the coffers, and if we wanted it done, we would do it ourselves. And that's what we're doing. We're not here asking council for money at all. We're going to fundraise that ourselves.
Well done.
Okay, so no further questions? Thank you very much. And we appear to be in a position where we might have... Okay, councillors, that's public forum.